Seconds away on Studio 5.
I need you now.
We're taking the lid off with singer, pastor, and author Smokie Norful. Have you always been living the life God wanted for you?
No.
And then,
Chemistry was crazy from the get-go. Neither one of us knew why.
see what's pulling Queen Mary away from music.
The way people say my songs move them or my lyrics move them, hopefully my acting will move them.
And Mel, you are on your way to see your son for the very first time, and you get arrested. It sounds like a movie. We're sitting down with the men behind Convicted, an incredible story of friendship between a crooked cop and the innocent man he sent to prison. All in Studio 5, starting now. And welcome to Studio 5. We're sitting down with gospel great Smokie Norful and taking the lid off in just a moment. But first, let's run down the 5 leading headlines in the world of uplifting entertainment news. We begin with number 5. At number 5, a People magazine exclusive and an American Idol surprise. Jordin Sparks is married to model Dana Isaiah, and they're expecting a baby boy.
Sparks met Isaiah's family when she traveled to Houston during Super Bowl weekend this past February. The two started talking when Sparks' mom and Isaiah's mom put their kids on a group text together, bonding quickly over their tight-knit families and shared Christian faith. Fast forward to July 16th when the couple decided to elope on vacation in Hawaii with a small group of friends. After surprising their loved ones with that news, the couple received the biggest shock of their lives when Sparks discovered she was pregnant in late August.
I saw it said positive and I walked out and I was like, I need you to come here. So he comes in and I turn around and I go, I'm pregnant. And it was like such a shock for both of us. And then I turned around and then I started bawling in the closet.
At number 4, Prince Harry splashes across magazine covers.
Ladies, he's off the market, taken by this woman, Meghan Markle. Meghan shows off her glittering ring, 1 stone from Botswana and 2 from Princess Diana's personal collection. For Harry, a heartfelt tribute to his mother, the People's Princess.
You know, to be able to have this, which sort of links where you come from, and Botswana, which is important to us, and it's perfect.
It is days like today when I really miss having her around and miss being able to share the happy news. But you know, with the ring and with everything else that's going on, I'm sure she's with us. I'm sure she's with us.
And with that, we're continuing the countdown throughout the rest of the show. Smokie Norful has been in the music business as a songwriter and recording artist for about 20 years now. The singer and pastor is now an author with a new book titled Take the Lid Off. And he's sitting down with us for this week's Studio 5 interview. I'm forever yours. His soulful, timeless sound makes Smokie Norful a gospel great. The 2-time Grammy winner is also a husband, father, and has a voice in the pulpit as pastor of Chicago's Victory Life Cathedral.
This is what the old people used to say. They say, this joy I have, the world didn't give it to me, so what? Oh, y'all got the same grandmama, I see.
I want to begin with the subtitle of the book, Trust God, Release the Pressure, and Find the Life He Wants for You. And of course, we know the book is Take the Lid Off. Have you always been living the life God wanted for you?
No.
We wanted to hear that. We wanted to hear that.
No. And, you know, it's amazing how many people look at where you are now, look at the successes or the triumphs and victories that you have, and they make that assumption that you've always lived the life God wanted you to live. But I don't think there's any of us who hasn't had a moment in time or a season of our lives. Some seasons in people's lives last longer than others, but all of us are flawed individuals, and we're vessels and imperfect vessels, and we're being created and made and shaped and molded to look more like Him. And so for me, it's been no different than anybody else's journey. I did have the benefit of a very strong foundation. And I think, you know, the scripture is really accurate and definitely correct and true when it says train up a child in the way that he should go, and when he's old, Well, thankfully, it didn't take me getting old before I realized. But living the life that God wants for me has been a process, and it's an ongoing, perpetual process.
Now, we know that we saw great success in your music career, and then as you're on this rise, you didn't walk away from it, but sort of took a step back. Is that fair?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. You know, I didn't walk away. I'll never abandon it. It is a part of my call and my assignment. I wouldn't think that God would bless me the way that He has for me not to utilize it in some capacity. So it's still there, and it's still a part, and will always be a part. But I did have to remove myself from the active role of traveling and living out of a bag and being in all the concerts and hotel to hotel, so that I could focus on shepherding His flock and really building the church that God blessed, favored, and assigned me to pastor.
And being a pastor.
Absolutely.
Would you say you ever ran from that calling of being a pastor?
Did I run, man? It was a marathon. I run. No, man, I ran, kicked, and screamed to try to get away from that responsibility. I grew up a pastor's kid. And so I knew the burden, the sacrifice, the responsibility that came with that. I grew up in the parsonage, which was right next door to the church. Oh, wow. So I experienced it firsthand. And I knew that would come with a level of sacrifice, even in my own personal desires and passions and stuff I wanted to do. Because now I'm accountable not just to God, but I'm openly and visibly accountable to a lot of people.
Absolutely.
And so that comes with an awesome responsibility. So yes, I ran. I was Jonah. I'm Jonah the Junior. But you know, you will figure out very quickly when the Bible says the earth is the Lord's, the fullness thereof, and they that dwell therein. There's no place you can run.
Absolutely.
Wherever you go, He's there.
I want to end with this question. The book is called Take the Lid Off.
Take the Lid Off.
And there's a cooking lesson behind that.
There is. Take the lid off.
What happened that you need to take the lid off?
Man, listen. I love food. I love to cook. I used to love it more when I was younger, but now my schedule is changed.
It's hard to keep
Loving
it
to
in
cook
there.
is not as passionate as I used to be. But growing up, I was in the kitchen always under my great-grandmother, and so she taught me all of these phenomenal Southern dishes. And one of them was rice, and I liked sweet rice. We get this argument all over the country. I go some places, they like just salt and pepper. Some people want butter and sugar. And so we wanted butter and sugar down south. But nonetheless, because it was my favorite dish, she taught me how to make it. And one of the first lessons I learned was don't ever put a lid on the top of a boiling pot of rice. It erupted. The stuff was coming out of the pot, oozing down the sides. The fire was licking it up. It was a mess, and I panicked. And she was in the kitchen with me, so I yelled across the room, Grandmama, look, there's something wrong. And she says, take the lid off. And I'm like, no, it's a fire. You don't understand. Like, that's not going to help. And she says, no, take the lid off. And I snatched the lid off. Everything settled, simmered down, and it finished its process. And, of course, we had a great product on the other side. Well, from that analogy and from that imagery, I really took liberty to tell the world that there's so many lids that have been placed on us. We got political lids, and socioeconomic lids, and you know, the cultural lids, and just the pain and the pressure of just life in general. And a lot of times we don't even realize we have a lid on, that we're reaching a boiling point, that everything is spilling over because it's our normal now. And unfortunately, it has become normal for so many people that they have to be reminded there is a purpose for you. There is a plan for your life, that your plan and the purpose is bigger than what you're dealing with and what you're going through in this season. And also they need strategies, practical ways to snatch the lid off of their lives so they too can settle down and allow God's perfect work to complete His course in our lives and for us to live the life He desires for us to have.
Take the Lid Off is available right now wherever books are sold. And Smokie Norful also has a new album. It's titled Nothing is Impossible, and it's available on all digital platforms. And still to come here on Studio 5.
It's all right. It's just a car. It must have backfired. They say it stops eventually.
Go behind the scenes of Mudbound with the cast that includes singer Mary J. Blige.
And just give me goosebumps right now. You don't have to guess, you know. And she always keeps like a silver lining in so much darkness and turmoil.
And welcome back to Studio 5. The countdown of the best headlines in uplifting entertainment news continues. Now it's time for number 3. At number 3, Kirk Franklin.
Show me your face. fill up this space.
The gospel great took to Instagram with a major announcement for gospel music coming to his hometown, Dallas, Texas.
Memorial Day weekend, it will be the first ever of its kind in the history of the genre. Myself and Live Nation, we partnered to give you the Exodus Music Festival. Kirk Franklin's Exodus Music and Arts Festival.
At number 2.
And the Grammy goes to...
2018 Grammy nominations are out, and a few friends of Studio 5 have made the cut.
What a beautiful name it is. What a beautiful name it is, you say.
Hillsong Worship could take home the Best Contemporary Christian Song Award for What a Beautiful Name.
I say it's too hard not to.
Tina Campbell is up for Best Gospel Song for this single, Too Hard Not To.
God wanted me to convey this message because this is the story of my life.
Never have to be alone.
And CeCe Winans is nominated in the same category for Never Have to Be Alone, a song co-written and produced by her son, Alvin Love III.
I found out a whole nother level that I didn't know that God had really blessed him with, downloaded in him.
And that leaves only one more headline in this week's countdown. We'll bring you that in just a bit. Time now to head to the small screen. 2 men return home from World War II to work on a farm in Mississippi where they struggled to adjust to life after the war and with racism. That's the premise of Mudbound, a film whose cast includes Mary J. Blige. Here's your Studio 5 first look.
I learned how to stitch up a bleeding wound, load and fire a shotgun. My hands did these things, but I was never easy in my mind.
My charge of taking it on was making a story about 2 families, so this dark symbiotic relationship with the Jacksons and McCallums, equally balanced, and showing how they're like a dark mirror of each other in a way.
I held his heartbeat in my hand.
Way down in the hole.
All that time he was gone, I only prayed for him.
For Garrett Hedlund, I liked him for Jamie, because I imagine Jamie's character's going from dreamer to ghost. So I needed like someone who could feel disconnected and bring a haunted quality to his work.
Over there, I was a liberator. People lined up in the streets waiting for us.
Sometimes I actually miss it.
Yeah, me too.
I thought it was one of the most beautiful, sort of poetic, kind of tragic, honest, real stories I'd read in a long time. Dee Reese directing it, it was just, I don't think any other director could have done what she did in this.
You're the one always talking about our own parcel, the only way to get up from underneath it.
What made me want to be a part of the film was Dee Reese, the director. I'm a huge fan. I saw Bessie, I saw Pariah like so many times.
Don't want you working for them.
I won't be working for them. I'll be working for us.
I knew I wanted Mary J. Blige for Florence because I knew I wanted a woman who could have a very reserved exterior, but very vulnerable interior, like a raging in her life. And Mary has that.
I don't know what they let you do over there, but you in Mississippi now. You use the back door.
Jamie saw in a different way. And when his eyes were on me, I felt like I was no longer invisible.
For Laura, I needed a woman who could be 2 women, and Carey Mulligan goes from like Laura of the mind to Laura of the body. She does that very well.
You better open your eyes, big brother. You're so busy worrying about yourself and your farm, you can't even see your own wife is miserable.
I really loved the structure of the film, the way that it was told from different narratives. I think it's always really nice when you can get into the mind of different people. This film doesn't let you off the hook. You're always seeing things differently from people's, different people's perspectives.
They work this land all they life.
I used to walking away from the fight. Not no more.
This land that never would be theirs.
You don't need to go, Jamie.
I can't stay here. They worked until they sweated.
You'll be okay.
They sweated until they bled. They bled until they died.
I think the thing that makes Mudbound compelling, no matter who you are, where you are, is it deals with like inheritance, which we can all interrogate ourselves. It deals with like home, which is something that is an expanding, evolving question. It deals with citizenship, like who belongs to a place and who doesn't. And so all of those are evergreen kind of ideas that are constantly questioning and shifting.
When I think of the farm, I think of mud. I dreamed in brown.
It's really, really close to and relevant to how we're living, the times we're living in today.
Way down in the water.
And you can watch Mudbound right now on Netflix. Up next on Studio 5, sitting down with an officer who sent an innocent man to prison. You see signs you can clearly see as he is telling you he has nothing, but you pursue anyway. Why? See why the two men are now best friends with a masterful book on the power of forgiveness. And welcome back to Studio 5. We have made it to the final headline in this week's countdown of the best in uplifting entertainment news. At number 1, the faith story behind the creation of the iconic Apple Store.
My favorite verse, Mark 12:31. It's love your neighbor as yourself. Yes. It's the people you work with, it's your customers, it's your business partners. And so if you're trying to honor that, you got to do it in work, through work, and that's what the Apple Store is all about.
That's Apple Store creator Ron Johnson appearing on the Dove Channel's Frankly Faraci, where he also talked about his faith and friendship with the late Steve Jobs.
Steve and I didn't talk about it a lot, but I remember when he first had cancer and we had a long phone call about faith and what it meant to me and what it could mean to him. And my only advice was very simple. Steve, for a person who's as smart as you are, now you ought to take some time and think about this issue of eternity. Is it there or not? And how do you think about it? I said, just don't take it for granted.
And that's a wrap for this week's countdown. A crooked cop, an innocent man, and an unlikely journey of forgiveness and friendship. Sounds like a movie, but that sums up the real-life story of Jamel McGee and Andrew Collins. Andrew is the crooked cop, and Jamel is the man he sent to jail for a crime he did not commit. Today, they're best friends, and the look at how they got there is this week's Studio 5 Bright Spot. This story begins February 8th, 2006, here in Benton Harbor, Michigan, a town of about 10,000 people. Two of them, Jamel McGee and former police officer Andrew Collins. So, Mel, you are on your way to see your son for the very first time, and you get arrested. Take me back to that day.
Yeah, I was. My son's mother was on her way to bring him to me for the first time. Our relationship was kind of rocky, so this was a good thing, you know. So I had just got pulled over earlier that morning for driving on suspended license. So I was like, I didn't want to drive. I didn't want to take that chance. So my cousin's friend was at the house, and I was living with my aunt at this time, and I asked him, can I get a ride? And he said, okay, cool, fine, I'll take you over there. And we get over there, I get my phone, I go inside the store. And when I came out of the store, this guy was approaching me, talking about he's a cop and where's the dope? And I'm like, what dope? And I kept walking around him because I'm like, I ain't got time for this. You know what I'm saying? Whoever you are, let me go and get home. And he was like, no, and reached out his badge and was like, yeah, where's the dope? And I'm like, oh man, I ain't got nothing. And I dropped my bags and, you know, he searched me, and he searched me twice, and still found nothing. And then that time I was just like, okay, I don't got nothing. I started to unbuckle my pants and just let my pants fall, and I was just like, I don't got nothing. We get to the station and I was being booked for possession with intent to deliver crack cocaine.
Not only booked, but convicted. And Andrew, you're that officer.
That's correct.
You see signs you can clearly see as he is telling you he has nothing, but you pursue anyway. Why?
Yeah, so that morning I had caught a guy with some crack cocaine, and he made a phone call and said that he was ordering crack from this big-time drug dealer that I had heard of before. Had never met the guy, but now that guy is the target in my brain. I'm going after this big-time drug dealer. It's going to advance my career, all those ego boosters. So he tells me what vehicle they're going to be in, where they're going to be. I show up, the vehicle's there, and there's one guy in the vehicle, but he's got some physical disabilities, and I knew my guy didn't. So I said, okay, that's not the guy. He's involved, but where's my guy? And then Jamel comes out of the store, and I thought, there's my guy. He looked like a drug dealer. What the heck does a drug dealer look like, right? He wasn't dressed much differently than he is now. And I can tell you, my boy's not a drug dealer, right? So I approached him and thought, there's my guy. So I initiated the conversation with him in a very arrogant, very boastful, I got you type of way. There was really drugs brought there that day, not by Jamel. He just caught a ride with the guy. But by the end of the day, he's sitting in jail under the wrong name because I thought he was the guy. So it was 2 days later, the fingerprints came back that that's Jamel McGee, not the guy I was looking for. So that should have, if the system doesn't fail, that should release him right there. But what happens is the FBI calls me and says, what's going on with this? We thought you had our guy. And I just made up a story and said, oh, I just confused the names. It was really Jamel McGee. And I wrote a supplemental report and later lied at his trial and in front of a jury and in front of a judge, and he was convicted.
And this is not the first time you had done that.
And by the end of my career, I was planting drugs at crime scenes. I was taking money off people. I was taking money from the city that I worked for. I had fallen so far so fast, and it all blew up in my face.
Andrew finds himself in prison, serving time for locking up innocent men like Jamel. In jail, what are you thinking? You have not seen your son that you were going to see for the very first time. You have all these years in jail, and you know that you're in there for something you didn't do.
I was just thinking of anger and how I can get back and harming him. Actually, I made a goal for myself to hurt him as soon as I got home.
So you do get out some years later, and eventually you see him.
Yeah.
Do you hurt him?
God had a different plan.
He had a different plan.
Yeah, and it wasn't mine. So, and at that moment, when I saw him and I was squeezing his hand, and my mind, myself, the flesh was telling me to hit this man. You're gonna do what you gotta do, get it over with. And my son was right there. In that moment, I'm like, man, I'm teaching my son firsthand how to make these mistakes.
Wow.
You know, so no, I don't want to hurt him. No. You know, and God had already worked it out on me to, you know, to let this thing go, because holding that and dealing with that was far more complicated than doing this.
How do you receive that forgiveness?
This was about a year after I got out of prison. We run into each other in Benton Harbor, and that day I apologized to him, but it didn't come across as if he had forgiven me. That day didn't end the way that I wanted it to. But then God brought us back together 4 years later through the cafe that I was working at. And that day, as we sat and talked, I started apologizing to Jamel again, because I felt like God had given me a second chance to say I'm sorry. And he was almost offended. He was leaning away from me. He was like, stop it, it's over, it's forgiven. You meant it that day in the park and you mean it now.
Yeah.
Stop it. And I said, Jamel, can we walk this thing out as friends? He said, I think God wants us to.
And you can read the full story of these men's lives in this book, Convicted. It's available right now wherever books are sold. Still ahead on the show.
The Bible says that when little baby Jesus was born, he was born to the Virgin Mary. Blige.
The man behind the famous Medea is here with a powerful lesson of forgiveness all his own. We're sitting down with Tyler Perry in Studio 5 next. We're almost out of time for this episode of Studio 5, so here is what we're working on for next week.
I wanted to honor his memory with it, but I also wanted it to do some good.
She's the face of the third hour of NBC's Today Show.
At the same time, the fierce army of the Philistines
and the voice of a new biblical project to reach young people.
Somebody get me someone who can actually sing and soothe my tormented soul.
Studio 5 is in New York City for a candid conversation with Kathy Lee Gifford. And that is just one story from next week's rundown. Hope you'll join us for that. As for this show, I'm giving the final word to media mogul Tyler Perry. He has a new book titled Higher is Waiting. And one key to reaching that higher is forgiveness. It's a powerful lesson from a man who forgave his abusive father and is now taking care of him.
If you take a moment to understand your parent or whomever's hurt you, you don't have to talk to them, but try to get the information from them. If you can, if they'll share it and be honest, because sometimes there's so much pain they don't want to, but if they're family members or somebody who can tell you, it'll paint a picture of a human being that you can realize that are flawed and who had no skills, who had no hope, who only had a third grade education, who never went to a counselor, who didn't understand much, you know? But if you understand that, it allows you to not excuse it, but forgive it, because all things work together for your good.
all things are working together for our good. Indeed, all things. That is a great final word for this edition of Studio 5. Until next time, reach out and touch me at Ephraim Graham on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and Snapchat. And then you be sure to come on back and see where Studio 5 takes you next week. Bye-bye, everybody.